What was taken by the sword will be reclaimed by the sword. By the 1160s, the strategic situation had reversed. The Crusader states, once expanding, were now contracting. Edessa was gone forever. Antioch was isolated. The kingdom of Jerusalem faced threats on every border. Only the Franks' superior castles and the military order's discipline kept total collapse at bay. Then, in 1163, a crisis in Egypt changed everything. The Fatimid Caliphate, Shia rivals to Nur ad-Din's Sunni orthodoxy, was collapsing into civil war. Both Nur ad-Din and King Amalric of Jerusalem recognized that whoever controlled Egypt's vast wealth would dominate the region. The race for Egypt would bring Saladin to prominence and set the stage for the Crusader state's greatest crisis. Nur ad-Din sent his trusted general, Shirkuh, accompanied by his nephew, Saladin. The Franks responded with their own invasions. For 6 years, Egypt became a battlefield where the future of Outremer would be decided. When Nur ad-Din died in 1174, the Franks breathed a sigh of relief. His son was young and weak. The Muslim coalition he had built seemed likely to fragment, but they celebrated too soon. In Egypt, Saladin had made himself sultan. He claimed to be merely Nur ad-Din's faithful servant, but everyone knew better. The student had surpassed the master. Where Nur ad-Din had begun the reconquest, Saladin would complete it. The crescent was indeed ascendant, and its light would soon eclipse the cross over Jerusalem itself. The golden age of Outremer was ending. The age of Saladin was about to begin. In the scorching heat of July 1187, on a plateau called the Horns of Hattin, the fate of the Crusader kingdoms hung in the balance. King Guy of Jerusalem had led the largest army Outremer had ever fielded, stripping garrisons from every castle, leaving nothing in reserve. Across from them, Saladin commanded the united forces of Egypt and Syria. Between them lay not just a battlefield, but the culmination of decades of struggle. How had it come to this? The answer lay in the remarkable rise of Saladin and the equally remarkable folly of the Franks who faced him. Saladin was an unlikely conqueror. Born Yusuf ibn Ayyub in Tikrit, he was a Kurd in a world dominated by Turks and Arabs. His early career showed little promise of future greatness. He preferred religious studies to warfare, poetry to politics. When his uncle Shirkuh dragged him on the first expedition to Egypt, Saladin went reluctantly, but Egypt transformed him. When Shirkuh died in 1169, Saladin found himself, at barely 30 years old, vizier to the Fatimid Caliph. Within 2 years, he had abolished the Fatimid Caliphate, returning Egypt to Sunni orthodoxy and making himself sultan. It was a masterpiece of political maneuvering that alarmed both Nur ad-Din and the Franks. Bahar ad-Din, Saladin's friend and biographer, described his transformation. In Egypt, he discovered his destiny. The pleasure-loving young man became an ascetic. The reluctant soldier became a strategist. Most remarkably, the ambitious politician became a genuine believer in jihad. This last point was crucial. While Saladin certainly enjoyed power and its privileges, he also possessed genuine religious conviction. He spent vast sums building mosques and madrasas. He lived simply, giving away so much that he died nearly penniless. Most importantly, he made the liberation of Jerusalem his life's mission, not just for political gain, but as a sacred duty. After Nur ad-Din's death in 1174, Saladin spent a decade consolidating power. He had to defeat Nur ad-Din's heirs, convince suspicious emirs of his legitimacy, and build the coalition necessary to challenge the Franks. His methods combined military pressure with generous diplomacy. Former enemies found themselves richly rewarded for switching sides. The Franks watched this consolidation with a mixture of fear and fatal overconfidence. They had survived Zengi and Nur ad-Din. Surely they could handle another Muslim warlord. Besides, they had their own strengths. The military orders were at their peak. Frankish castles seemed impregnable. The Italian cities provided steady revenue through trade. But the kingdom of Jerusalem was rotting from within. King Baldwin IV, known as the Leper King, was dying by inches. Despite his disease, he was a capable ruler who understood Saladin's threat. His sister Sibylla's marriage to Guy of Lusignan, a handsome but incompetent newcomer, created a faction that would prove disastrous. The real tragedy was Raynald of Chatillon. This former Prince of Antioch, now Lord of Kerak through marriage, was either the bravest or most foolish man in Outremer. He repeatedly broke truces with Saladin, raiding Muslim caravans and even launching a naval expedition toward Mecca itself. Each provocation gave Saladin more justification for jihad. In 1186, Raynald attacked a massive caravan travelling from Cairo to Damascus. Among the travellers was Saladin's sister. The insult was unforgivable. Saladin swore that he would kill Raynald with his own hands, an oath that would have terrible consequences. By 1187, all the pieces were in place for catastrophe. Baldwin IV was dead. Guy of Lusignan, weak and easily influenced, wore the crown. The kingdom was split between those who wanted to maintain the truce with Saladin and hawks like Raynald who preferred war. When Saladin invaded in force, Guy faced an impossible choice. He could remain behind Jerusalem's walls and watch Saladin ravage the kingdom, or he could march out to meet him. The Templars and Raynald pushed for battle. Raymond of Tripoli, the wisest of the Frankish lords, counselled caution. Guy, as usual, chose the worst possible option. He marched out but did so stupidly. The Frankish army, perhaps 20,000 strong including 1,200 knights, left the springs of Sapphira on July 3rd. Their destination was Tiberias, where Saladin besieged Raymond of Tripoli's wife. It was a trap and Raymond knew it. He begged Guy to turn back, saying he would rather lose his wife than the kingdom. Guy pressed on. The march was agony. July in Galilee is merciless, and Saladin had poisoned or blocked every water source. Muslim light cavalry harassed the column constantly, shooting arrows and retreating before the knights could respond. By nightfall, the Frankish army was desperate with thirst, still miles from the Sea of Galilee. They camped on the plateau of Hattin, near two volcanic hills, called the Horns. Saladin's army surrounded them during the night. As dawn broke on July 4th, the Franks found themselves trapped, parched, and facing an enemy who held all the advantages. The battle was less a fight than a systematic destruction. Saladin had water brought up for his troops to drink, in full view of the thirsty Franks. When Guy ordered charges, the Muslim forces simply parted, let the exhausted knights through, then closed again. Frankish infantry, mad with thirst, broke ranks trying to reach the lake they could see but not reach. By afternoon it was over. The cream of Frankish nobility lay dead or captured. The true cross, Christianity's most sacred relic in the East, fell into Muslim hands. Guy and most of the great lords were prisoners. Only Raymond of Tripoli and a few others escaped the trap. Saladin's treatment of the prisoners revealed both his nobility and his ruthlessness. He received Guy and the other nobles with courtesy, offering them sherbet cooled with snow from Mount Hermon. But when Raynald of Chatillon reached for the cup, Saladin stopped him. In Arab custom, sharing food or drink meant protection. Raynald would receive no such mercy. "This man," Saladin said, "has broken every oath, violated every truce, attacked peaceful pilgrims and merchants. I swore I would kill him, and I keep my oaths." He struck off Raynald's head with his own sword, fulfilling his vow. The common knights faced varied fates. Most were enslaved, but the military orders received special treatment. Saladin offered the Templars and Hospitallers a choice: convert to Islam or die. To a man, they chose death. 200 warrior monks were executed, many by Sufi mystics who considered it an honor to kill these Christian equivalents. With the kingdom's army destroyed, Saladin swept through the Frankish lands like a cleansing fire. Castle after castle surrendered, their garrisons gone. Cities opened their gates, hoping for mercy. Within weeks, only a handful of strongholds remained in Christian hands. Jerusalem itself held out until September. The city was packed with refugees, but had few defenders. Balian of Ibelin, one of the few lords to survive Hattin, led the defence. He knighted every noble boy over 16, and even commoners, desperate to create some kind of fighting force. But everyone knew the end was inevitable. After a brief siege, Balian negotiated surrender. The contrast with the Frankish conquest of 1099 was stark. Saladin allowed the Christian population to leave peacefully, paying ransom for their freedom. Those who couldn't pay were enslaved, but there was no massacre, no burning of religious sites. On October 2nd, 1187, Saladin entered Jerusalem. His first act was to purify the Al-Aqsa Mosque, washing away decades of Christian occupation with rosewater. The cross atop the dome of the rock was pulled down as his soldiers cried, "Allahu Akbar!" For the first time in 88 years, the call to prayer echoed over the holy city. The Christian world reeled in shock. Pope Urban III reportedly died of grief upon hearing the news. The call went out for a new crusade, the third, which would bring the legendary kings of Europe to the east. But the kingdom of Jerusalem, as it had existed, was dead. Yet Saladin's victory was not complete. Tyre, under the inspired leadership of Conrad of Montferrat, held out. This single city would become the seedbed for Frankish recovery. The military order's castles, built to withstand years of siege, proved their worth. Crac des Chevaliers and other fortresses remained defiant islands in the Muslim Sea. More surprisingly, Saladin's very mercy created problems. By allowing the Frankish nobility to ransom themselves, he ensured they would return to fight another day. His chivalrous treatment of enemies won him admiration even among Christians, but it also meant the Crusader states, though mortally wounded, were not yet dead. As 1187 ended, Saladin controlled most of the former Crusader territories, but holding them would prove as challenging as taking them. The Third Crusade was coming, bringing Richard the Lionheart and other legendary warriors. The struggle for the Holy Land was entering a new phase. Hattin had changed everything. The age of Crusader expansion was over forever. From now on, the Franks would be fighting not to grow, but merely to survive. The dream of Outremer had become a nightmare from which there would be no awakening. But history is never simple. Even in defeat, the Crusader ideal evolved and endured. The cross and crescent would continue their deadly dance for another century, though the music had fundamentally changed. The news of Jerusalem's fall reached Europe like a thunderclap from a clear sky. In Paris, in London, in Rome, people wept openly in the streets. Churches held continuous masses. Knights who had never considered crusading suddenly burned to take the cross. The disaster at Hattin had done what decades of papal preaching couldn't. It had united Western Christendom in a single purpose. But unity of purpose didn't mean unity of action. The Third Crusade, launched with such fervour, would become a case study in how personality, politics, and pride could undermine even the holiest of causes. 3 of Europe's greatest monarchs took the cross. Frederick Barbarossa, the aging Holy Roman Emperor, commanded the respect due to his years and victories. Philip Augustus of France, young and cunning, saw the crusade as a chance to eclipse his rivals. Richard of England, called the Lionheart, brought legendary military skill matched only by his legendary temper. Frederick never reached the Holy Land. In June 1190, the 70-year-old emperor drowned crossing a river in Anatolia. His army, the largest and best organised, melted away. Some returned home, others pressed on, arriving in Acre as a shadow of their former strength.